Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. I hope that you are doing well. Thank you, Ilsa, for inviting me to give this brief presentation on a Jessup coaching guide. It is truly a pleasure. To the new coaches, give yourself a round of applause. Congratulations, and welcome to the Jessup community. My name is Atithep Meas. It's nice to meet you all through this presentation. To speedrun introductions, I participated in the Jessup in 2018 and 2019, and I've coached the competition ever since. So in total, it's about 5 to 6 years. At all relevant times, I've been with the Royal University of Law and Economics, here based in Phnom Penh, Cambodia. When I was coaching, especially during my earlier years, I was also a consultant for a US-based human rights NGO called Project Expedite Justice that assisted victims of atrocity crimes and transnational crimes. Apart from coaching, I've also judged in the Jessup regional and international rounds, so anything espoused below will be my experience from both from all angles of the competition, from being a student to being a coach to being a judge. And my experience will usually be from Cambodia, from what I've learned in Cambodia and what I've learned in the States. So this presentation will cover these this will be the overview. I will give some facts about the Jessup, the administrative duties for you as a coach, and then actually putting on the coaching pants, and then I will ultimately conclude with the aspirations and recommendations. Now, disclaimer, very important. This is only a guide, right? So feel free to adapt and personalize these steps or this guide to fit your social, religious, traditional, and cultural context. I understand that not all jurisdiction and not all law schools are made equal, right? And so you have to make do with what you have. So feel free to be creative and make this competition your own. Now, about the Jessup real quick, this is only for coaches who are absolutely new to the Jessup and may have some understanding of the ICJ, but it's more for coaches who may have transitioned from other moot courts like the VIS in commercial arbitration or IHL moot court competitions, right? So the Philip C. Jessup Moot Court Competition, otherwise known as the Jessup, is inspired and reflects the legal proceeding of the Royal Court, the International Court of Justice. The moot court competition itself will require the team of students to represent the states as agents, right? States being the applicant and the respondent states. These states are typically, usually, always fictional in their politics and relations, but they do have some parallel with reality, especially when their issues can be seen in what is currently happening at the international level. For example, in my year in 2018, we had this issue of whether a state had a right to develop, possess, and operate a submarine capable of housing nuclear weapons, right? And the theme surrounded what then President Trump was doing at the General Assembly in threatening North Korea with nuclear threats. And so in some years, it really feels like you're living and breathing in the Jessup problem. So the students, again, they will be required to represent the two states, but as applicant and respondent, and representation is conducted through writing the memorials and pleading on behalf of those states. The competition itself is 7 to 8 months long, with the initial 5 months being dedicated to memorial writing and the remaining time designated for oral pleadings. So I've attached some of the key timeline for this. September 15th, that will be when the Jessup problem is released. January 12th, that's when you're required to submit the two memorials, the applicant and the respondent memorials, through ILSA portal. And then after that, it's fair game. It depends on you, your local jurisdiction, as well as your rival universities as to when to conduct a regional or a national round. Now, administrative duties. One of the most important thing, or two important documents that you have to have on hand with you as a coach, is one, the official rules of the Jessup, and then the schedule, right? I will attach a screenshot of the schedule in the later slides. I've also attached a link here, but those will be your two most important documents on how to navigate the competition. So some of the things that I do take priority in trying to remember most are some of the things here. Team registration, very important. You cannot participate if you have not registered your team. There's a deadline for that, and registration is already open. And it's open to 10 members, 5 students, and then 5 advisors, including the coaches. Next would be the administrative deadlines. Again, this will be shown in the next slide. I will attach a screenshot of the schedule, and I think the agenda are fairly self-explanatory that don't need a lot of diving into. So on this slide, here is a screenshot of what you need to be aware of, essentially the deadlines, what you need to do in time and try not to be late in submissions, especially, for example, let's say in January 12th, right? ILSA used to have this excuse late submission, although it comes with penalty points, right? And so they're doing away with that, and I think for now, late submissions are not considered under any circumstances. And so always keep in mind of the schedule. ILSA also provides a death timer, and so because they operate under Eastern US Eastern time zone, to avoid the confusion, because some of us are from an entirely different time zone, this helps, and all of these are present on their website. On to the next part, putting on the coaching pants, right? So the most important thing is to form a team before September 15th, 2025, before the release of the problem. You don't want to do it any later, because otherwise it'll just slow the progress of your team. Other teams have started way earlier. I've heard stories of how some teams, the moment they ended their trip to Washington, D.C., the moment they go back home, they already start researching on the next sets of topics that would be the next themes for the problem. And so start early, form a team as soon as possible so that you get to formulate a schedule that accommodates everybody, and probably fill in some of the gaps where if there's a student who have maybe trouble with research or writing, you can spend the extra time before the release of the problem to fix those students' problems. So for the tryout, it's, for my example, there can be, the process itself might be different depending on the law school, right? For my example, at my university in Colorado Boulder, interested students were only required to submit a CV and a 500-word motivational letter. I think that is a skewed process. I'm not sure why that was the case. It's a stark difference when compared to my local university here in Phnom Penh, Cambodia. Um, the process of our tryout is that we would draft an entirely new problem that reflects the theme of the Jessup problem, and we're mandating the students for 2 weeks, 14 days to to undergo this tryout. 10 days will be for memorial writing, and the 3 to 4 days for the oral pleadings. Now, note that because the students only have 14 days, instead of including 4 claims as the tryout problem, I'm not that cruel, right? I instead put only 2 of 4 of the problems to be a part of the tryout, and um, and students are only required to represent either applicant or respondent, the side of their choosing. Uh, yeah, and so on the right, these are just some of the traits that I look for in a student. I think that's self-explanatory, and it's up to personal taste of the coach. So I would say to the new coaches, use your best judgment, but these are the things that I personally look for in a student. My teaching philosophy and method is to make students struggle. I will further explain this in the context or in the example of the use of AI. Um, and what I tend to make my students do is through repetition and discipline, right? I guess I can go back to the earlier slide. The willingness to make sacrifice. For example, I always tell my students to treat the Jessup Moot Court as if it's a full-time job. It's a 9 to 5, right? They should live, eat, and breathe only within the context of the Jessup. Now, that is not necessarily an order or an instruction for them to drop other things like personal life or maybe their coursework from their university. No, it's more like this is something that you should prioritize, right? Because it's a moot court competition. We're going to represent our country before the international stage. That's how important the Jessup moot court is to me. And because the moot court itself is 8 months long, that is a lot of time. To be fair, the competition itself is very dense and very complex in terms of the materials that it will require the students to read, analyze, write, and speak. I do tend to think of prompts for them to act not only as the agent or lawyer representing the states. I want to teach them how to be an advocate, how to be a judge, how to be a policymaker, right? So practically, for example, in being a judge, even though they are students, if I am not there, if I'm not available to meet them for a session, for example, instead of not having the meeting at all, I would task the students to judge each other, right? If the applicants are going up, then the respondents would act as judges because they know each other's arguments. It helps them to be more detailed and substantive and more critical when it comes to their line of questioning. And it helps prep them too in going before their national or international rounds. Now, the use of AI and plagiarism, this might be a little bit controversial, but again, my philosophy is to make students struggle. And I have a zero tolerance for the use of AI, even when it's used for the purposes of research. I think that when students are introduced to a more convenient form of doing something, they tend to get lazy. I'm old school, and so in my opinion, I firmly believe that AI should not replace the student. And how I usually do this is I would spend my weekends in meeting with the students, and meetings will go for longer than you would anticipate. Instead of like 2 hours with the students, I would spend 4 to 6, and just, monitoring their progress and see how they research, see how they write, see how they speak, right? And so it's my way of providing oversight to this use of AI. Um, I really dislike it. It's a tool. It's not meant to replace the work of the student. An argument can be made for research or case management, other tedious administrative tasks. I just want to fully avoid that, their excuse for those tasks do not seep in to their actual writing and speaking ability. Uh, and so I don't want the students to rely on AI, and I want to avoid it being a habit. Um, so my suggestion to sort of fix that is for you as a coach to be aware of all the available materials that exist on the online space. Jessup will provide database to Hein Online or Juice Mundi, all of these like research databases, and students can use them, right? And also will also release the first and the second batches of reading materials. They will help. They're not um, they can serve as inspiration for, hey, these are the things that might help in drafting your argument. Although they're not cheat sheets or they're not answers, they're still just articles that is relevant to the making of some of the arguments. Ilsa also posts the final rounds of um, of the competition on their YouTube page. But again, I think you should only introduce these to the students, like the final round YouTube videos to the students at the end of the competition, so that it doesn't limit their creativity, right? It's that line of argument where you show them the answer and they cannot go beyond what was shown to them. So try to avoid that. Aspirations and recommendations. This may come as a little bit preachy, because you have a lot of time with your students. You influence them, right? And in my case, students remember most of the Jessup from their law school experience. And so what they learned will 100% translate to how they will conduct themselves when they graduate from university. So you are in this very influential role to their development, professional development. So take time to be creative, to enrich students, not only about aspects of international law, but try to introduce them to your local issues, right? Because uh, because it's how states act that contributes to the workings of international law. Um, I only say this because I come from a jurisdiction where local courts are not transparent, and we don't really have case laws. We don't really have opinions of judges, and so we find it very difficult to teach laws or international law in the Cambodian context. Um, my other message would just be that international law only has value when you, as the coach, the students, the population, the state, and the international community accorded so. In these very difficult times, you see conflicts blowing up here, left and right, and you play a very important role in inspiring students to become world leaders, right? For them to be in these positions of authorities that would dictate their state's foreign policy, for example, that contributes positively to the development of international law. In Michael's words, I don't have a direct quote. I will save that for when you do go to DC, because I think hearing it from the man himself when you're there in person is more impactful. But he will say something along the lines of future world leaders, friends of the Jessup, may adopt a different approach to conflicts and conflict resolution because they have met and gotten the chance to know one another from the Jessup, right? Last but not least, as part of my last recommendation, would be to take lots of photos, as they are meme potential and it's great for storytelling. As you can see on the most left, that's a picture of my student. Our table, that is the most organized that our table has ever been. Usually it's stacked with more computers, more laptops, more paper, more compromis, more materials, right? The table is just flooded with paper. And when I saw that, it reminded me of this scene that I saw on the news when President Xi Jinping was just sitting there alone on one side when they were meeting with Russia. On the most right, this is a picture of my students praying. They are not religious in any way. They do respect religion in some capacity, but this is more about superstition. And this is the day before their national rounds, and so they are praying that everything goes right, that they do well and stuff like that, because again, this competition means so much to the university and it means so much to them. I hope that this was insightful and helpful. If you do have any questions or concerns, please hesitate to ask. um, I'm kidding. I will be happy to help in any authorized and appropriate capacity. But again, I would defer you to the best source of information, and that would be Ilsa through either Chris, Michael himself, or Roxana. And as my lasting message, I remind everyone that this is only a guide, and that part of the journey, in the most fun of it, in my opinion, is to experiment, to make this competition your own. That said, I wish you all the best of luck. Take care.